As Chris said, this is the last night of our study, and tonight the topic is dealing with life's valleys. And I signed up for this because we were supposed to bring ice cream tonight. And I didn't really look at the topic, just like you, Forrest. And here I've been depressed all week trying to come up with this topic. I'm going to start off by reading a paragraph in the book here. I think it's really good way to start. Peaks and valleys are a normal part of life, but it does not follow that we have to remain in a valley when we find ourselves in one. It also is not true that we are in a valley because we took a wrong turn. Sometimes this is the case, but sometimes we find ourselves in a valley because life has happened. And we live in a flawed world where evil exists. We interact with people daily who impact our lives positively and negatively. I thought that was a kind of a good summary way to start. But I do have a story. When I was back in college, uh, the Game and Fish Department recruited some of us to come out and help work with a deer hunt check station. And this was out in the middle of White Sands Missile Range. If you're familiar at all with New Mexico, uh, they shoot missiles, and that's where the first atomic bomb was set and blown up. So it's quite a big expanse, and you couldn't go on the missile range at all. But they had this special deer hunt at the end of December for a weekend, and they needed some bright, intelligent people, but they got us to go out and help check people in out of this check station where there's one road in up into the mountains and one road out, and we camped there at the road and let people in and out. And as people left, if they were successful with their deer hunt, our job was to age the deer. I guess there was some kind of population thing they were studying. If they'd let us, if they weren't going to mount the deer, we would remove the lower jaw, because the way you age deer and other ungulates is you look at their teeth of the lower jaw, right? So we would age their deer and label them and throw them in a box. Uh, Sunday evening comes along. It had been raining and snowing all weekend, and we were kind of ready to leave. And it was just before dark. And this guy drives up, comes down the road to leave, and he pulls off into the parking area. And that usually means they got a deer, right? So you got to go do your thing, age the deer, pull the jaw, do that. And this guy, he's kind of a short fellow, and his truck is kind of beat up. And he steps out of his truck, and then he just stands there. And so I started to go visit with him, and then I got to looking at him, and he was kind of damp, and he was filthy, and one of his pant legs was missing, clear up above his knee. It was all scorched black, and I thought it was hilarious, but he was just standing there looking at me, and he says this. He said, "I've been rained on, and I've been snowed on, and I've been set on fire." Pat is laughing. I don't know if he. He didn't have a deer, and so I invited him to the big bonfire we had, and we gave him some coffee and stuff. So I think that was a fitting way to start our class. So the question I want to start us with is, have you ever felt rained on and snowed on and set on fire in your Christian life? Physically, mentally, spiritually? Has that ever happened to you? And if it has, what do you do with that? So that's our cheerful class for tonight. The key verse here in the And the material is, you might have guessed it, James 1, 2 through 4. James, the Lord's half-brother. James, one of the earlier books written in the New Testament, if not the first, in the mid-40s, maybe. If you think about what was going on in the mid-40s, Paul was out on maybe his second missionary journey at that time. James writes, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." You know, I've always struggled with this verse. I have a hard time finding joy when trials come, when valleys come. But joy is not the same as happiness. I think that's where I get stuff confused. Happiness is controlled by external things around you, things that you experience, events, moments, stuff like that. But joy is part of the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5 and 22. And I think it ties to a deep contentment and a confidence in God that you have. And you can have joy in that no matter what's happening around you, because you remember the promises and where you're going. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 10, it's when Paul's talking about, he's been talking about the thorn he has in the flesh, right? And he's pleaded with God, can you remove this thorn 3 times? And after that, he says, "Therefore, I am well content with weakness, with insults, with distress, with persecutions, with difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And in just the previous chapter, Paul has gone through and outlined and described some of the terrible things that have happened to him, the persecutions that he's endured at the hands of the Jews and at the hands of the Gentiles, being beaten with rods and etc., being shipwrecked. And he concludes in the verses we just read, when I am weak, then I am strong. God's message to Paul is, well, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Maybe that's what joy looks like, or at least in part. So, into the meat of the class. This might be a hard class for some of us. I know it was a really hard class for me to prepare for, and the more I worked on it, the worse it got. It might cause us to remember times when we almost gave up. Maybe we did give up. It might cause us to relive some things that happened that we would rather forget. But for some reason, we never can. That was my struggle this week. And it might be that your story is exactly what someone else sitting here tonight needs to hear to help them and bring encouragement to them. So my hope is that this is a class that I'm not the only one that's going to teach, that you guys all have an opportunity to teach by sharing your experiences. And that would be my hope tonight, that you would feel comfortable with remembering some of those things. Did you have something, Phil? Go ahead.
I think that, for me anyway, sometimes when we come to those valleys, we think like Job's friends. what did I do wrong? When in reality, we've been trying hard to live right. And so we beat ourselves up searching for that where we went wrong, when in reality, that's not at all what's happened.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it? It's, what's that saying? We're our own worst critic, right? I do that. I'm the one that beats myself up for, why did I do that? And after tonight, I will go home the rest of the week and think, did I really say that? Did I mean to say that? One of the benefits of standing before you, I suppose. Good thought, though. Anybody else want to start? You'll have lots of opportunities to start, by golly. But if you do have something on your heart and you want to share it, please feel free to do that. Maybe the place to start is looking at what might cause some of our valley experiences, our struggles. Maybe one category would be mental things, emotional things. Sometimes anxiety might take over our lives and it might leave us desperate. Sometimes it's pretty easy to get really anxious about stuff. Maybe a relationship with a friend or someone you thought was a friend, or a family member gets broken and that haunts us. And I don't know how to fix that. Maybe someone close to you has passed away and you're not sure if you can get past that. Emotional and mental things. Maybe anger got the best of you one time, and because of the way you expressed yourself, it caused some real problems. Maybe there's some physical things going on in your life. Sometimes our bodies turn against us, and we have to face pain or disease or an injury like Rod's facing. And that can cause a valley. Maybe there's a lot of pain involved with that. Maybe an addiction has left you without any hope, and you're free falling, and you don't know when you're going to stop. Maybe we have made some bad decisions that we need to turn away from. Maybe it's your own fault that you're in this valley. You know, the consequences of bad decisions might live with you the rest of your life, even if you turn from that and take a different direction, depending on what it is. And maybe someone else's bad choices have impacted you, and you have to live with that. And that could be really catastrophic. Physical things that might have happened. And then I guess we could talk about spiritual things. They kind of intertwine with physical and emotional struggles that we might have. Have you ever wondered if God is actually listening to your prayers? Did you have a comment, Diane? Sorry.
Every time I read this, I think of a time in our lives in the year 2000. We took a job in Tennessee at a boys' home to be house parents. But we didn't realize that there were a bunch of juvenile delinquents. And that it was the hardest thing that we ever faced in our life as a married couple. I kept quoting this verse, and those kids would sneak out at night And we got a new kid, and they were beating them up because they were locked in the basement. And it was the most difficult thing. It hurt us emotionally, it hurt us spiritually. And it took a long time to heal from that particular situation. But I kept quoting this verse,
The verse in James.
the one can count it all joy.
Yeah.
And I wondered where the joy was.
Looking back, have you seen God in that at all?
Only the place that we went to hear, where friends were.
You can add something, Jerry? It seems like you're about to say something.
No, I was just thinking that that was a rough year. We were looking for work for almost a year. We tried out in about 14 different congregations, I think. And so we went to visit Dan Owens, who was preaching in Kentucky at that time. And I know where there's a congregation. You know, it was after we left Boys On. And then he said, Hibbing, Minnesota. So we said, we don't want to go to Hibbing, Minnesota. Don't send us to Hibbing, Minnesota. A couple months later, I called him up and I said, can you give me the phone number for that place in Hibbing, Minnesota? So I did. So long story short, 2 weeks on December the 7th, 2000, we pulled into Hibbing, Minnesota with you all, and it was the 5 best years that I had been there. I didn't like the people, I didn't like the community, but the church was so good. I was glad to be in Hibbing, Minnesota.
Yeah. That's a tough place to move in the middle of the winter.
Yeah. Oh, they was good.
Good. Did I see another hand somewhere? Thank you for sharing that. Man. And you have to wonder, how is it that we ended up there? How is it that, because I'm sure you prayed about it, right? Is this where God wants us to be? It seems like a good place. Sometimes doesn't work out. Yeah. And it still hurts really bad, doesn't it? I wonder if Jacob's favorite son Joseph ever wondered if God is listening to prayers as he sat in an Egyptian prison. I suppose we hear the question a lot, why me, Lord? Maybe we've even asked that. So how deep are some of the valleys you have experienced? I picture, you know those pictures you see of Switzerland where there's like this valley and it's like cha-ching and there's a little village in the bottom of that? I feel like some of my valleys are like that. And how in the world will I ever get out of that? But maybe your valley doesn't look like that. Maybe it's not so deep. But maybe it still causes you to stumble or causes you to hurt. Scott?
Yeah, my dad was a military pilot. He was an Air Force officer. I really looked up to him, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly in the Air Force. I really didn't want to do anything else. I was really laser focused on that. And to me, I look back, it's amazing. But I actually made it to pilot training. But then I found out that I hadn't inherited the right stuff from my dad. And so I didn't make it through that. And I got another assignment, so I got to stay in the Air Force. But about 12 years later, I didn't make rank, and when you're an officer, you make rank or you get out. And so there we were. We had just arrived here and bought a house, and we all of a sudden were faced with having to give up our source of income, and basically start all over again. That's why the problem with the military is a lot of jobs just don't translate into the civilian world. So it was quite a downer for Caroline and I, and we had 2 young kids, and but we some word kind of got depressed for a short time, but it's kind of like there's some time when you basically, as they always say, fish or cut bait, and it's like, where are you going to give up? What are you going to do? And so, well, we're going to pray and rely on God, and to make a long story short, in the end, I got another job, and what was really amazing was when I started teaching, everything fell into place. I was actually able to finish my military retirement by being a part of the Air Guard, and in the end, looking way back, it's in the end everything worked out because we basically said, okay, God, you obviously have plans for us. What is it? And please help us to keep attention on that. And He did. It just took time and patience and faith. And we grew a lot during that time.
And it's really neat when you can, when you're in a catastrophic or really harmful, hurtful time, and then 10 years later or 20 years later, if you're able to look back and say, that was a God thing. God was looking out for me. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does. And that's really special when it does. As I get older, and I have experienced more and more things, some good things, some not so good things, and I carry all that with me. And, I used to look at older Christians, of which I guess now I am one, and I used to think, wow, look how wise they are. Look, they got all their act together, and they got everything figured out, and it's just smooth sailing for them. And I never knew how many valleys that they had experienced and how they had to deal with all that and how much they have to carry with them. But I'm learning about that now, so that's a good thing, I suppose. I've been rained on and snowed on and set on fire, and it's, for the most part, been by fellow Christians. Not from here, but from before here. More than once. And I don't know what to do with that. I've had a hard time coping with that. So as a result of that, I have trust issues. I struggle to move past some things, and I feel like I must be a real wimp that I'm not trusting in God enough. And I've often wondered, when does 1 Peter 1:22 kick in? I'll read that for you. 1 Peter 1:22. Peter, this is in the chapter of when Peter is talking about God says, be holy because I am holy. So that's the command, the admonition to the Christians that would read Peter's letter. And verse 22 says, since you have in obedience to the truth purified your souls for a sincere love of the brethren, fervently love one another from the heart. When does that kick in? It should kick in right away, right? After we're baptized and we want to live a new life and do everything we can do to please God and to serve others. But did you know there are mean people in the world? And did you know that some of those mean people become Christians? And they're still mean people. Maybe they're working on that. And maybe I just stumbled into some situations at the wrong time where they hadn't grown past that. But I carry that. So let's talk about deep spiritual valleys when you want to give up. How do you overcome that? Roy?
If you've lived long enough to have a history you can look back on and can see where things have been orchestrated by God, ultimately for your good, when at the time you thought the pit was bottomless. That should give you faith, should. I struggle with that still, to trust Him now.
For new things that might come at you.
Man, if you're blessed enough to be able to see that, right? If you see that, whatever it was, that job or that children's home or whatever, and if you can look back and say, you know, God was working there. Sometimes that doesn't happen though, right? I'm not blessed enough to see that far back. Anybody else? Bill?
As I look through my life, I see valleys, but I also see some crevasses. And we need to, at all costs, avoid those crevasses. Because those are the ones that get us, and we'll have a really hard time, if we do, recovering from.
So you're talking about a valley that has like a bottomless abyss at the bottom.
Yeah. And sometimes we just have to, for instance, talking about, I've experienced some of the same things that you're talking about. And there are sometimes that we just have to remove ourselves from those positions and move on to some other people around us, or get some other people around us, so that they can help us through the valley and not fall in the crevasse.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. That's really, yeah. I think maybe I have fallen in crevasse a few times. Yeah. You don't need to hear about all the struggles that I had, but you know, sometimes identifying the valley is an easy thing. That's one of the ways you sometimes can get out. Why am I here? Sometimes it's easy to figure out why you're here. Sometimes maybe you made a bad investment, or you bought a dud car, or your house is falling down, and well, you know, I wasn't really as wise as I should have been in making that decision. So sometimes it's easy to identify why you're there, and maybe not so easy to get out, but at least you know it's not something that somebody else done to you. Maybe it's our own fault. Maybe we need to repent. Maybe our life is not lined up with what God's plan is. And we need to be brave enough to repent and change direction. Maybe it's beyond our understanding. We don't know why we're here. How in the world could I have gotten here? I'm not a bad person, am I? What in the world caused those people to act that way towards me? Think Joseph ever thought that in Egypt? He was lucky enough to live long enough to see God's work in his world, wasn't he? Troy. Yeah, he ended up in prison after being abused by his brothers and sold as a slave and getting hauled off to Egypt and being accused of something he didn't do and getting thrown in jail. And his final response was, well, that was God's plan, that I would be in Egypt to save the Hebrew nation. I don't know that I could have done that, but he did. Maybe, Troy.
Your comment about Joseph reminds me of, I believe it was Mordecai telling Esther,
Yeah.
maybe this is the one thing that God wants you to do.
Maybe you are
Will
where
you
you
be
are
faithful in doing that one thing?
for such a time as this. Yeah. Yeah. And man, what a blessing if we're able to see that, right? But yeah, sometimes it's not obvious. And Esther took a lot of bravery. She could have been killed, but she went before the king and declared, well, this Haman guy, he's out to kill my people. Did you know that? Yeah, that may be the thing that we're put in that place for. You know, maybe you don't get out of the valley in this life. Maybe you have a terminal illness. Maybe a broken relationship that will not resolve in your lifetime. But, you know, God has an incredible place for his children who are faithful. And maybe you can hold on to that. Maybe you need to ask for some help, surround yourself with some different people that actually care about you. There's a famous saying about strength. Some attribute it to Winston Churchill. And it says, if you're going through hard times, keep on going. There's also, I was trying to decide if I ought to even say this, but maybe a little levity would be good about now. There was a country western song about 20 years ago that went something like, if you're going through blank, keep on going. You may get out before the devil even knows you're there. You remember that song? You remember that? Yeah, it was a fun song. The devil knows you're there, by the way. Maybe he's helped get you there. But I like the Winston Churchill thing better. I think that's more appropriate for what we're supposed to be doing tonight. Want to run too long. Some verses maybe I wanted us to look at. Kind of like the James verse about the joy, but maybe some verses we can hang on to, some verses that I kind of hang on to. I'll read them to you and then I'll give you the verse reference after, so you don't have to feel like you have to find them. This is the Apostle Paul and the last letter that he has written to his son in the faith, Timothy. It is a trustworthy statement, for if we died with him, we also live with him. If we endure, we also reign with him. If we deny him, he also will deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. That's in 2 Timothy 2:11 through 13. You guys already know I'm going here. For I am already being poured out as a drink offering. This is Paul talking to Timothy. And the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. I really like the overcome passages in the book of Revelation. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. That's Revelation 2 and verse 7. Down in verse 10, it says, be faithful unto death, and he who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. Verse 26 in Revelation 2, he who overcomes and he who keeps my deeds until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations. He who overcomes will thus be clothed in white garments, and I will not erase his name from the book of life. And I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. Revelation 3 and verse 5. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will not go out from it anymore. And I will write on him the name of my God. Christ speaking in all of these. That's verse 12 of Revelation 3. He who overcomes, I will grant to him to sit down with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no longer any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. Revelation 21:4. Those who overcome will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. Revelation 21:7. So cling to the verses, the promises from God, right? When you're going through the valley, know there's a way to get out. Search for a way to get out. If you need somebody to help you, ask somebody, one of your brothers or sisters. Are there any other comments or thoughts tonight before we close up and have some much deserved ice cream? Yeah.
There's an old preacher back in the 1800s that he said, I've learned to kiss the wave that throws me upon the rock of ages. And, you know, I mean, that's basically James chapter 1, right? What we already talked about. But his philosophy was to ask, you know, these trials, these calamities that come into our lives, to ask it, what are you here to teach me? I mean, it's just another way of reading James chapter 1, I guess. Because when you're in the middle of it, you know, reminding them, hey, have you learned to kiss the wave that threw you upon the rock of ages? But I guess maybe that's a different way of thinking of it. And when I'm in a valley, I allow myself to wallow for just a little bit. I think that's what the lament psalms teach us, right? That there are times in our lives where we can cry out to God and say it's not fair, and how long is this going to go on? Where are you, God? But I think it was Emmitt Smith that would say, win or lose, he would bask in that or wallow in that for 24 hours. He would allow himself 24 hours, whether it's, you know, losing the biggest game or winning the Super Bowl. It was 24 hours, and then, okay, I got to get back to work now. I can't just sit here forever. So that's I have a playlist on my phone that's just my wallowing music. That
Lots of Enya or something.
Enya's too positive for my valleys. But just to allow, like,
Yeah.
you know, let's feel all the feels here, and then typically, you know, it's like, all right, I did that. There's no sense in staying here, and so off we go.
God's still got